I told myself I was just tired. That's all. Just work stress. Just a change of scenery. Just a hotel room and a king-size bed I wouldn't share with anyone. I even laughed a little when I walked into the lobby, heels clicking too loud on marble floors. It felt dramatic. But maybe I needed it to. The front desk was quiet. A vase of white lilies sat near the bell. Soft music like something from a spa floated through the air. And then he looked up. I wasn't expecting him. He couldn't have been older than 25. Dark hair. Crisp uniform. That kind of polite posture that said, professional. But it was his eyes that stopped me. He didn't look at me like I was another guest. He looked at me like I was something. Not someone to serve. Not someone to impress. Someone to wonder about. Welcome, madam, he said, voice low, almost too gentle. And I smiled politely like I always do. But my pulse had already betrayed me. There was something in the way he said it. As if he already knew I wasn't here for business. As if he already knew I hadn't been touched in months. I handed him my ID. Our fingers didn't touch. But they didn't have to. Because in that 3-second silence, I felt seen. Not recognized. Not admired. Seen. I was still wearing my wedding ring. Not that it meant anything anymore. He handed me the keycard. Room 803, he said, eyes still on mine. And just before I turned away, he smiled like he was holding back a thought. That night, I stared at the ceiling longer than I cared to admit, because no one had looked at me like that in a very long time. And I wasn't sure if I felt guilty or awake. I told myself it was nothing. Just a late request. Just a simple thing. A bucket of ice like I'd done 100 times in 100 other hotels. But when I picked up the phone and pressed room service, I already knew who I was hoping would answer. And when he did, front desk, how can I assist you? His voice had that same calm gravity, like everything was slower when he spoke. I just need some ice, I said. And I hated how my voice sounded too careful, too rehearsed. Of course, madam. Right away. 10 minutes. That's how long it took. But I changed twice. First into a shirt, then out of it. Finally settling on the robe, the hotel's own thick, soft, untied just enough that I wasn't sure if I wanted to hide or be seen. There was a knock. 3 soft taps. Not rushed. I opened the door and there he was. No tray. Just the silver bucket in his hands, like he brought it himself on purpose. And for a second, neither of us said anything. Your ice, he said, holding it out but not too quickly. When I reached to take it, his fingers brushed mine. Just lightly. Just enough that my breath caught. I could have looked away. I should have. But I didn't. Thank you, I said slower than I meant to. And then he said it. Is there anything else you need, madam? But it didn't sound like customer service. Sounded like a whisper. Like a dare. My heart was louder than the quiet between us. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to close the door. But I also wanted to pull him inside. Just to feel wanted again. Instead I stood there. Staring at him. Trying to remember how I used to be. Before everything went dull. He looked at me. Not with arrogance but with restraint. Like he was waiting. Not to take. But to be chosen. And that's when I realized. I wasn't the only one holding back. I should have closed the door. He gave me the ice. I said thank you. That should have been the end. But I didn't step back. And he didn't either. It wasn't a stare. It was a moment that stretched too far across the silence. Like both of us forgot we were supposed to pretend. The rope slipped slightly off one shoulder. Not much. Just enough that his gaze fell. And he caught himself. But not fast enough. As I felt it. That flicker of hesitation. That rush of heat. Not from embarrassment. From awareness. And something in me shifted. I wasn't thinking about what time it was, or how many years older I was, or what he must have assumed about the woman in room 803 with no ring on her finger anymore. I was only thinking about the way he looked at me, like I was still beautiful, still someone worth pausing for. I'm sorry, he said suddenly, eyes back on mine, voice low, and I could tell he meant it. Not because he was ashamed, but because he didn't want to ruin the moment. That made it worse. Or better. I reached out, I don't even know why, to take the bucket from him again even though he'd already handed it to me. And as my hand brushed his once more, slower this time, he didn't move. His skin was warm, solid, still. And for a second, I just let my fingers rest there, barely touching. But everything in me was leaning forward. I could hear the soft hum of the air vent, the faint click of someone's heels far down the hallway, and my own breath slow deeper than it should have been. I stepped back finally, only a few inches, but it felt like pulling away from something I didn't want to leave. "Good night," I said, and he nodded. Not "good night, madam." Not "enjoy your stay." Just a nod, like he couldn't trust himself to say anything more. I closed the door, leaning against it. I shut, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel invisible anymore. I didn't sleep. Not really. I turned the lights off, climbed under the thick white sheets, stared at the ceiling like it might explain what just happened, and still, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way he looked at me. Not hungry, not shy, just present, like he wasn't rushing to want me. He already did. And that feeling kept me awake. I told myself it was nothing, just a harmless exchange. He was polite, maybe curious, nothing more. But my body didn't believe me. The sheets felt too heavy, the silence too loud, and the heat in my chest wouldn't leave me alone. I was drifting in and out, some restless place between sleep and memory, when the knock came. Not loud, not urgent, just deliberate. 3 soft taps, just like before. I sat up, heart skipping for reasons I didn't want to name. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe it wasn't even real, some half-dream I imagined. But then it came again. Just once. I walked to the door slowly, rope tied this time, fingers trembling at the knot. No peephole. No voice. Just that weight of a presence on the other side. I unlocked the latch, heart in my throat, and opened it. It was him. Still in uniform, still quiet. But this time his eyes said everything first. "I shouldn't be here," he whispered. And something about the way he said it, low, broken, made me feel like neither of us could pretend anymore. I didn't invite him in, not with words. But I stepped back, just enough. And he stood there like he was asking one more time, "Are you sure?" And I was, even if I didn't say it, even if I barely breathed it. He stepped inside, and the door closed behind him. He didn't reach for me. Not right away. He just stood there inside the room, like the air was heavier now, like he could feel every part of me coming undone, without a single word. And I just stood with him. 2 people who shouldn't be here. One in a robe, one in a uniform, both pretending this wasn't happening. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was electric. He looked at me like I was something delicate, but not breakable, like he knew he could ruin this, and he didn't want to. There was restraint in his stillness. Not fear, just control. Like he didn't want to move first, like he needed me to decide. I took a slow breath, my hand still resting on the knot of the robe. And in that breath, I felt everything rise. The ache of loneliness, the warmth of being seen, the fire I thought I'd buried years ago. I walked past him, not away, just toward the little table by the window. The city lights outside were soft, blurred by the glass. Somewhere down there the world was still spinning. But in here, it had stopped. I poured myself a glass of water, took a sip, held it in my mouth longer than I should have. He hadn't moved, not an inch. And somehow, that made it worse. Or better. I finally turned around, glass still in hand. And when I met his eyes again, he looked like a man holding back a storm. "I don't know what this is," I whispered. And his voice came back low, sure. "Me neither." That was all I needed. Because when I stepped toward him this time, it wasn't curiosity. It was choice. His breath caught, but he didn't reach. He waited. And I touched his hand. Warm. Still. Real. And then everything inside me started to move again. I didn't plan to. It just happened. Like gravity had been waiting for me to stop resisting. I leaned in. Not to kiss him. Not yet. Just close enough to hear how fast he was breathing. And it was fast. Measured but not calm. Like he was holding everything back. except his pulse. His eyes searched mine. Slowly. Carefully. Not demanding. Just asking. I could smell his cologne. Subtle clean, something fresh that made my skin hum. And I realized I was shaking. Not from fear. From aliveness. From the weight of being this close to someone who wanted me not because he could, but because he couldn't help it. He still hadn't touched me. His hands were loose at his sides, like they were waiting for permission from the air itself. And I gave it. Not with words. Just with the way I moved. My fingers grazed the front of his shirt. I felt the rise of his chest beneath cotton, the warmth radiating through the fabric. And he let out a breath, sharp, quiet, like it had been caught in his lungs for minutes. Still he waited. I moved closer, until our foreheads almost touched, until I could feel the heat between us, growing heavier by the second. I haven't done this in a long time, I whispered. I know, he said. That undid me more than anything. Not because it meant he understood me, but because it meant he saw all the things I didn't say. I pressed my cheek to his. Not kissing, not yet. Just feeling the softness of his skin against mine. He exhaled like it hurt. And then, so gently I could have missed it. His hand came up to rest at the back of my waist. Not pulling. Just there. Like an anchor. Like a promise. The first kiss didn't come from him. It came from me. And it wasn't careful. I don't even remember deciding. I just remember needing. His breath was warm on my cheek. His hand still resting at my waist. And suddenly I wasn't afraid anymore. I tilted my head, closed the space, and touched my lips to his like I was remembering how. It wasn't soft. It wasn't slow. It was real. Hungry but quiet. Years of silence and self-denial, rising all at once and pouring out through my mouth. And he let me. He didn't take over. He didn't rush. He let me lead like this moment belonged to me first. But when he did kiss me back, God, everything in me folded. His hand pressed against the curve of my spine, guiding me just an inch closer. Not enough to trap me, just enough to say stay. His lips tasted like breath and something new, like something I hadn't let myself feel in far too long. And when he finally broke the kiss, he didn't move away. He stayed right there, forehead resting against mine. Both of us breathing like we just surfaced from underwater. I didn't speak, because I couldn't. There were no words for what I felt. No neat category to file this under. Just this soft aching need to not go back. To how things were before. He brushed a piece of hair behind my ear, barely touching, and it made my whole body shiver. I didn't want to assume, he whispered. You didn't, I said. And for the first time, I meant it. The lights stayed on. And somehow that felt more intimate than anything else we did. I didn't cover myself. Didn't hide behind shadows or sheets. I just stood there, bare in a way I hadn't been in years. Not exposed. Not on display. Just seen. And he looked at me like I was allowed to exist. All of me. Every line, every flaw, every part of myself. I'd spent so long apologizing for. He didn't reach for me this time. He waited. Even then. And that was what undid me. Because he could have. He wanted to. I could feel it in the way his chest rose. In the way his eyes lingered just long enough to feel like a confession. But he let me decide. And I did. Not out of loneliness. Not because I was broken or reckless or needing to feel something. But because I wanted to. Because for the first time in too long, I felt beautiful. Not polished. Not posed. Just real. I moved to him slowly, letting my body speak the things I couldn't say out loud. And when he held me, not roughly, not urgently, but like I was something he never thought he'd get to touch, I forgot who I was supposed to be. The woman with the tidy life. The quiet marriage. The practiced smile. She disappeared. And what was left was just me. Warm. Alive. Unfolding in someone else's hands. When we finally lay there, wrapped in nothing but silence and skin. He brushed his thumb along my shoulder, like he was still memorizing me. And I asked him quietly, "Do you always do this?" He looked at me, shook his head. "No," he said. "Only once." And I believed him. Because sometimes, a moment isn't just a moment. It's the part of you that finally breathes again. The part you almost forgot was still there.